There's two really great things, I think, and that they're directly applicable to maybe to any career, but certainly a career in marketing. When you're talking about doing your education in theater. One is I was able to, probably because there weren't a ton of guys who were interested in theater, but I was able to work a lot as an actor. I mean, I worked a lot. I worked a lot in high school, I worked a lot in college, I worked a lot when I got out of college. And over the course of that time, I was always active in the theater. I was always in a play, playing a role, or sometimes multiple roles. And that actually gives you a really unique perspective, because you have the opportunity, and I had the opportunity, by the time I was 25 years old, I had 100 bosses. I'd been in 100 different theatrical productions. And you really learn a lot when you work for 100 different people, right? I mean, you really get a sense of what it's like to get direction, to take direction, to put your faith and confidence in somebody who may or may not be a really interesting and dynamic leader for you. You know, but what are you going to do? I mean, you got a boss like anybody, and so you got to take direction. And that actually really gave, for me, the ability to work with a lot of different people and inside a lot of different creative processes that were led by others. Now, here's the thing about the creative process. People think that the creative process is something that is for art. And it is for art, of course, but the creative process has real value in business. Real value in business, because the creative process is about managing, in as much as you can, in an egalitarian environment, different people's point of views, their perspectives, leveraging what they bring to the table, and getting a problem solved. Here's the thing about the theater. Once you decide that the show is going up on a date, the show goes up on that date. No matter what. People are buying tickets, they will be there, right? So what you learn is to apply the creative process in really interesting and unique ways to deadlines and budgets. And that's really valuable in business. I bring a completely different perspective, and always have, to solving business problems than most business people. And it's been successful for me. It's hard for me to say that, because I've worked with most of the people in this room, and most of them are like, yeah, well, successful is relative, right? But anyway, we really value, in the marketing departments that I have the great pleasure in working in, we really value the creative process, right? We really value like everybody's opinion. Now, once we make a decision, the show's got to go up, right? So we make a decision and we execute against that decision. Okay, so let me talk a little bit about marketing in general and my approach to marketing in general, because I think that my approach to marketing in general is informed by my experience in business. I never took a business class. Never. So my experience is mostly informed by the mentors that I have had. And I haven't always been in marketing. I like to tell people that I've been in digital marketing for as long as there has been digital marketing. You too, by the way, because you started right around the same time as I did. But you know, the reality is that for big chunks of my career, I was dabbling in operations, I was dabbling in development, I was dabbling in a lot of different things. And there is no better characteristic or trait as a marketing professional that we can have than a deep understanding of our business unit. Like, what are the problems our operations people need to solve, and why? And what are the obstacles that prevent them from solving those problems? Because look, we have a whole different set of problems that we've got to solve from the marketing perspective, but you know what? We're paid to solve those problems, right? We're paid to come to the table with a plan, with a set of strategic objectives, to execute against those strategic objectives, and to do that in a way that generates sufficient revenue to justify the investment that we've made. That's our problem to solve. We have to solve that problem. Well, our operations folks have a whole host of other problems to solve, and if we can't get them interested in our problem, we're not going to win. Okay? And the only way to get anybody interested in your problem is, first, you must be interested in theirs. Does that make sense? Does everybody understand that? So you must be, if you take nothing else away from my presentation than this, please take this away. You have an obligation to understand your operations, your business unit, and to understand it deeply, and to understand it as well as the people on the operations side do. Because if you understand it deeply and you understand it as well, now you understand what their priorities are, and you can figure out how to package your plan into their priorities. And if you cannot package your plan into their priorities, I do not care how awesome your plan is, it will not get done, and so at the end of the day, it will have sucked. Does that make sense? I think the right approach to marketing, and this is my perspective as now a marketing leader, I don't do anything. I mean, those of you who work with me, they know this, I don't do anything. Marketing execution is no longer my job. It was my job for a long time. And so I remember acutely what it was like to have marketing execution be my job. And so perhaps my remarks or my comments today are going to be directly related to my current situation, which is that I'm responsible for marketing strategy, right? I'm responsible for understanding what our overarching business objectives are and for making sure that what we do as a marketing department not only is in support of those overarching business objectives, but that we are accountable to a significant chunk of our ability to achieve those business objectives. And, oh yeah, by the way, establishing that we are the right cultural fit inside of the greater community in which we operate. You know, we have two primary obligations. One, and the most important obligation, is that we've got to accomplish our business objectives, right? I mean, you know, I don't care what they are. I don't care whether it's quarterly distributions for a series of investors. I don't care if it's ROI for an individual digital campaign. We got to accomplish our business objectives. But the other thing that we've got to do, that we've got to make sure that we are tight with, is that we are a good cultural fit, that we are representing the values of the organization in the way that the organization would have us represent them, and that we are great colleagues. You know, it is really, really important for a marketing department and marketing representatives, in my opinion, to market themselves inside of an organization, and I do not mean self-promotion. Self-promotion sucks. Okay, it is a terrible way to spend your time. I'm just telling you that. Anybody who's worked with me knows that I'm not, I mean, look, I will get up here and filibuster and I love to talk about me, but I am not a self-promoter, right? I mean, it does not matter to me what people say, it only matters to me what people do and how they treat others. And so when I say that you must market yourself inside of your organization, what I really mean by that is you have to be known as someone who honors their commitments. If you say you're going to do something, you do it, you follow through on it. And quite frankly, you have to make sure that you are a great cultural fit. Because if you're not willing to be a great cultural fit, then don't cash the paycheck. You know, if you feel like there is not an alignment between your set of values and the way you do things and the organization in which you operate, then frankly, you need to leave. And you need to leave quickly, because at that point, the end is already written. I promise you, you'd rather leave than be invited to leave. You know, and that is the only way that that journey ends, by the way. All right, so talk about marketing now. All right, so and again, interrupt me with questions if you have them. I believe that the first thing that you need to do when you start thinking about your role as a marketing person is you need to think about, again, what are these business objectives? What questions am I here to answer? What solutions does the organization need from me? Frequently, you will find, if you report to operations especially, they do not know the answers to those questions, okay? Operations people, I had a saying when I was at Goldkey PHR, I served as the chief revenue officer for that company. Revenue management, sales, and marketing all reported up through me, or I was responsible for performance, one or the other. And I am here to tell you, revenue is too important to be left up to operators. It just is, right? Operators, some of whom are always focused on driving revenue, are great, but many of whom will very quickly decide that rather than risk investment in revenue, they would rather cut to get to their number. So what we have to do as marketers is we have to give them the confidence with our plan that they do not need to worry about our ability to invest in revenue. Once an organization stops investing in revenue, they start to get into a death spiral. And it's your job as marketers to make sure that they have the confidence that they need to always be comfortable investing in revenue, right? And the way you do that is you understand their business objectives, your business objectives, and you write a plan that gets you there. And the plan must be responsible. The plan cannot be bigger than the size of the goal, right? Once you figure out what needs to be done, you must marshal resources, you must decide on a strategic approach, you must marry resources to that strategic approach through a set of activities and actions, and then figure out what all that's going to cost. And then you have the responsibility for packaging all of that and presenting it and getting it bought off on. So I don't care what the organization is. If you can't take the number that you need to get the revenue that is required and divide it by the revenue that is then generated and get a pretty good story, you need to start over again. Does that make sense? Because you cannot invest more than you are going to generate, and quite frankly, you cannot invest more than you're going to generate by a period usually of about 8x. So, and you know, again, you could have different numbers, quite frankly, in different organizations, and you can take an approach as an organization that what you want to invest in is branding. Really, really hard to pencil a return on branding. You know, branding is something that you as an organization have to decide is a real priority for you, because branding does not get transactional. How many of you are responsible for branding at the organization you're in? Okay, all right. All right, so the great thing for you, and I know on the food and beverage side it's different, but you know, in the hotel business, you typically have people who are doing the branding for you, and they don't care what you think about the size of the investment. They're taking the money and they're investing it, right? That's a really great approach. If you can get that job, I suggest you take it. But unfortunately, not all of us can get that job. So let me talk about branding for a second, because branding is something that, I mean, like, frankly, Jen does everything in our organization, but Mike is Mike is responsible for our branding execution, right? Jen is responsible for our strategy. And the thing that's really, really tough for those guys, pretty frequently, quite frankly, is that when we acquire an asset, we have to answer a couple of questions. One is, what is our business objective with this asset? And the Harbor Group, by the way, buys a lot of companies and sells a lot of companies. And they're multifamily residential communities, but they're companies, right? And so we buy a lot and we sell a lot. The company is, Harbor Group is continuously changing the composition of our asset portfolio through acquisitions and dispositions. And when we buy, so that means when we buy a property, buy a community, we always know what the end is. When we buy a community, we say we are going to sell this in 4 years, and we're going to sell it because we've generated this much additional value, and we're going to get this kind of a premium. So it's, frankly, it's Jen's responsibility in our organization to understand what that business objective is and to ask the question, can we get there with our current customers? Will our current customers, if we can just keep all of them, which you can't, but if you can just keep all of them, can we get the business outcomes that we need to have the exit event that is required? And if the answer is no, that's a completely different marketing plan than if the answer is yes, right? If the answer is no, now what we've got to do is we've got to have an active turning over our customer base conversation with our operations team, and we've got to be very realistic about what the investment is, what investment is going to be required in order to replace those customers with brand new customers. Because there is, and I don't care what your organization is, there is nothing more expensive than a new customer. The new customer is your most expensive customer. Your solemn responsibility as a marketing leader in an organization should be, if you're good at it, making yourself not necessary. Does everybody understand what I mean by that? Because if the first thing you do as a marketing professional is you say, hey, look, let's just keep all the customers we have. And if you're able to be successful at just imbuing that into your corporate culture so that there is nothing more important than the customer that you have. So now marketing is all about for us, the resident experience. For the rest of you guys, the customer experience. If you make customer satisfaction your main mission and you can retain 100% of the customers you currently have, they're not going to need a head of marketing anymore. But guess what? You're already going to have moved on to a better job at a bigger place, and frankly, you're going to be a chief marketing officer somewhere.